Good. Okay, good evening everybody. How are you doing? Welcome to the Youngstown State University Alumni Lecture Series. I'm Dr. Brian Bonham, and we've had a big reorganization at YSU, so I have to remember my new title. I'm the Program Director in History in the Beagley College of Liberal Arts, Social Sciences and Education. And it's my great pleasure this evening to host Dr. Joe Alessi, who is a colleague in the same history program. Joe has a very long biography, which I've decided to edit a bit, so we'll only say a few of his many accomplishments here. Joe is a retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel and currently part-time faculty member in the history program here at YSU. He's senior Army instructor of the Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps at Youngstown East High School. Correct me if I get anything wrong here, by the way. He earned his bachelor's in secondary ed and comprehensive social studies and a commission as an officer in the U.S. Army through the ROTC at YSU. While on active duty as an infantry officer, Joe completed master's and doctoral degrees focusing on cultural and Native American history. Yep. His most recent publication is a monograph entitled Settling the Frontier, Urban Development in America's Borderlands, 1600 to 1830, on Westholme Publishing, and that was published this year, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Very good. He has numerous publishing and teaching credentials in history, but also in leadership, and tonight's talk is going to be on leadership, and
Yes, sir.
specifically the first rule of leadership, leading as a genuine, adaptive, and servant leader. Joe.
Yes, sir. Hello, Youngstown alumni, family, friends, and everybody else who's out there. First off, what we're going to attempt to do is teach you Leadership 101, or at least talk about leadership in 50 minutes or less, which is, well, impossible. So let's boil it down to how do you become an adaptive leader in modern times. We know today, in today's day and age, there's a lot of sensitivity to what people say and what they do. Unfortunately for a leader, you have to be able to lead in this environment today, and you don't have a choice. So one of the lessons you can learn, or at least a philosophy to adopt, is this first role leadership. So here we go. I'm going to kind of basically follow this outline. We're going to talk a little bit, define what leadership is, kind of the role of the leader, and then talk about ego, emotion, and sensitivity, and how you as a leader strip yourself of those things in order to lead well and become a servant, adaptive, and genuine leader. Leadership defined, according to Peter Northouse and others, is the ability to influence people to accomplish a task. Simply. I added a little bit to that and I said, in any situation or environment. Leadership is an art form. There's a science to it. Former General Colin Powell and Secretary of State once said, leadership is that spark past what the science of management says you could take an individual. So management says you could take an individual to this point, and then leadership is an art form that allows you to take it to the next level. And I agree. And when he was asked, well, what is that spark? He said, trust. And so how do you gain an organization's trust? How do you gain the trust of hundreds, in some cases thousands, to follow you? How do you motivate that many people? So, and then not only how do you motivate them, how do you motivate them in multiple situations? Does one leadership style apply to all situations? Absolutely not. So based upon the situation, the environment, the people, the cultural complexity of it all, you have to be able to be adaptable to lead in those situations. But the great thing is this first role leadership kind of allows you to be adaptable. What leadership is? Leadership's a process. It involves followers and leaders. I know you don't necessarily like the term, or we talked earlier about the term follower, but follower is basically a subordinate or an individual who subordinates themselves to your decision making. Or it's part of the decision making, but at the end of the day, you're the person who has to make the decision. It does involve both leader and follower. It's a two-way street, and it's all about relationships and relationship building. What is the role overall of a leader? The role of the leader is to, number one, empower your subordinates. You are there, you are given your position and your authority to empower others, and not to hold yourself higher than others or to look down upon others, but to empower them. You have the power and you delegate your power out. You have the responsibility. You always retain the responsibility, but you provide that power. The second thing is you remove obstacles for subordinates. I've met more leaders that have become obstacles for their subordinates. Don't be the obstacle, remove the obstacles. Again, you're giving power, position, authority, and sway in order to remove those obstacles for your subordinates to be able to be successful. If they're successful, you'll be successful. And the last is resource your subordinates. Don't tell your subordinates to do something, then not give them the resources to do it. I once had a commander, and he would love to pile things onto your plate. He'd be like, well, I want to do this, and I want to do this, and I want to do this. And I would sit there, and when he would tell me that, I'd be like, there went the peas. And he goes, peas? What are you talking about? I said, those are peas, sir. I said, you keep piling more stuff on the plate, the mashed potatoes are going next, and after that, the steak's following it. I said, you have to pick and choose, right? And if you want me to do this, you got to give me the resources to do it. Don't give a person a job and then not give them the resources. So what's the role of the leader? You empower subordinates, you remove obstacles for subordinates, and you, what's the third thing I said, you remember? I say it's a class, you're supposed to be in it, it's a lecture. So the third thing is what you do is you basically resource your subordinates, okay? Notice what the key word in each one of those, it's subordinate. Your job is to help subordinates out. So what's the first role of leadership? And how do you accomplish this role? First is you have to strip yourself of ego, emotion, and sensitivity. Ego. We all love ourselves, right? Most people do. You're not as good as you think you are, though. Nobody is. Ego is hilarious. Have you ever said, well, don't they know who I am?
I don't know if I've said that, actually.
Right?
But yeah, maybe.
Maybe once.
Maybe once or 10 times.
Right? Or wait, somebody pulls out in front of you on the road.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I
yeah.
have said something.
You might have said some, I don't know, colorful words, and you're offended that they pulled out in front of you. Yet 5 minutes later, you'll pull out in front of somebody else. Because didn't they know this is my road? So your ego gets in the way of your leadership ability. You have to strip yourself of ego. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. The second thing is emotion. Strongest emotions are hate, fear, and love. Think about all the things you've done that you regret when you've been angry, when you've been in love, or you've been in fear. We could talk about the pandemic today and talk about fear, but we won't get into that subject. But think about some of the things you've done in those capacities. Hate. I hate that person. Do you really hate? Do you really loathe somebody that bad that you hate them? And I'm going to get that person? And so your whole success is based upon some kind of revenge. Or love. You've bent over backwards for somebody and then somehow they've disappointed you and I've loved you so much and you let me down. So, the emotion is you have to remove yourself of emotion. Sometimes I get told I'm very unemotional. And you have to step outside yourself when you're leading and forget the emotion. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I want to have a bad day. I want to be a fool today. I want to do something that's going to get me in trouble today. And yet, as a leader, sometimes your subordinates will do something that's unwise or get themselves in trouble, or the organization, and you are very angry and upset with them. They didn't necessarily intend to do that. Those are the consequences. Now, you have to deal with the consequences. The third thing is sensitivity. People are going to tell you your baby is ugly. It's okay, right? It's okay. You're not going to make everybody happy. Leadership's not a popularity contest. You're going to be the person they talk bad about. It's okay. It's okay. You have to get over that sensitivity. Your job, your role is, again, to empower subordinates, remove those obstacles, and resource them to accomplish a mission. And you have to influence them to do that. And if you're overly emotional, if you're overly sensitive, if your ego can't fit into the room, you'll never be able to do that. And so therefore your organization won't have trust in you and won't be able to succeed. Now, ego and being an authentic servant leader. Isn't that kind of a paradox, being a servant but being a leader?
It reminds me a little bit, actually, of the whole idea of this sort of enlightened despot or benevolent despot from history, I suppose, which is, Peter the Great, the Russian emperor, figured himself as a sort of a servant leader in some respects. He used comparable language, actually.
Right.
The first servant of the state was a common sort of concept in Enlightenment monarchs.
What do you think they meant by that?
I think what they meant by that was that you lead, but the point of the leading is to serve a greater purpose, not to serve yourself, but to serve perhaps the state, the country, the people, or some greater thing than yourself.
How do you think they did?
Peter the Great did very well in many respects. I mean, he's extraordinarily important in having reoriented Russia in a very different direction. He certainly has his cruelties and things he did that we can criticize, but he was an extraordinarily effective leader, there's no doubt about that. And what he accomplished was very much more than just his own self-aggrandizement. He definitely changed Russia for the better in many respects.
Right, and he is remembered now as perhaps arguably the greatest,
That's why they call him the Great.
the greatest ruler that Russia has ever had. And he was a servant leader. And you're right, he did have those idiosyncrasies, and he wasn't perfect, because guess what? No leader's perfect. You are flawed. Again, your sensitivity. Your baby is ugly. You're not perfect. You don't know everything. You're never going to know everything. So you surround yourself, and one of the things Peter was very capable of doing, he surrounded himself with very capable people who were better than him in certain areas. As a good servant leader, you don't want necessarily people around you that are good in the same skill set you are. You want people that are good in the skill set you're not in.
Yeah. One of the things he's particularly famous for, actually, is bringing in Western experts, non-Russian experts from a variety of Western countries to perform functions that he himself couldn't perform, or that he didn't have people in his country to perform. He also learned all these tasks himself as best he could too. He was not a person who said, you do this and get back to me. He got involved in the things that he did as well.
Right, hold that thought, because when we talk about culture, we're going to come right back to that. So you need to have a good self-awareness as a servant leader, and that self-awareness is having an internal, what we call moral compass, knowing what you are good at, knowing what you're not good at, being confident in what you're good at, being confident in what you're not good at. When people ask me, hey, well, you play guitar.
A little bit. Yep.
He was a former, the guy's been on MTV, don't let him lie to you, a little bit, He was a rock star back in the 80s, right?
Yeah, I'm still a rock star.
Yeah, there you go. I dabble with the guitar. And I say, I think I know 4 chords. And I can fumble my way. The good ones.
They're good
G,
ones.
C, and D, right?
That's only 3.
That's right.
the 4th
Well,
one?
E minor, A minor.
Okay.
So I know what I'm good at, I know what I'm okay at, and I know what I'm not good at. And so if I was putting together a rock band, I sure wouldn't be the guitarist, but you would be. You have to understand that, and it's okay not to be the best person. Now, kind of like Peter the Great, you want to at least dabble and try to understand and learn these kind of skill sets that your subordinates are going to have. But going back to that moral compass, what's a moral compass?
I guess I would say, actually, when you use the term moral compass, it kind of reminds me of what they told me in Catholic school, sort of that little voice inside you that tells you, this is your conscience, as the Catholics taught it to me, but I guess it's that voice inside you that tells you what you're doing, and it's mediated by the values of the society around you.
All right, so let's talk about that moral. Is it right and wrong, or is it your version of right and wrong?
I guess it's a communication between the two, actually. I would say a moral compass is your sense of what is right based on what the larger community values as right.
Okay. What about the situation and the environment?
Yeah, those things are relevant. I think if you do what you think is right and everybody else is completely opposed to it, I'm not sure I would call that a moral compass. I think, if you just do what everyone tells you to do, I don't think that's following your moral compass either. I think there is a communication between the values that you have and the values that the wider community that you're serving have.
And so your values are shaped by your upbringing, your background, the situation, your experience, your crystallized cognitive abilities, those things you've recalled. For example, let's talk about the drinking age, 18. What do you think about that?
At this point, it's fine with me.
That's right, we are on
Yeah, I'm a little bit past 18, so
Right,
it's fine with
so
me.
right.
And
But-
even my daughter is well past 18, so
Well,
fine with me.
I always, when I was a commander in the 101st, I would buy a keg of beer for my soldiers and put it in what we would call the barracks or the day room. And one time, one of my soldiers said, "Sir, aren't you nervous because you have a bunch of 18-year-olds and they're not allowed to drink?" And I said, Well, we have our rules, and we had senior guys look out and mentor younger guys, and they knew the rules, and this was a privilege that could be taken away from at any time, blah, 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 blah. And I was willing to take the risk. Now, I'm not foolish, so I told my boss ahead of time, hey, look, I'm doing this. What do you think? He goes, I think that's a phenomenal idea. And he asked me one time, he goes, why? I said, well, sir, they're 18 years old. They're allowed to carry a gun. They're allowed to go to combat, and they're allowed to die for their country. They're allowed to vote for arguably the most powerful person in the world, but they're not responsible and capable enough to have a beer. So it just doesn't make sense to me. And I'll be honest with you, if unfortunately one of my guys happened to pass away in combat or elsewhere, at least they'll be able to say they had a beer. So moral compass isn't necessarily what society tells you is right and wrong. It's leading from what you believe is right and wrong. Now, most leaders, very good leaders, are leaders who come from a good background where you're going to understand those kind of things. But again, it's cultural. When you're dealing with leaders from one culture versus another culture, you can't assign, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more when we talk about emotion and culture and understanding people, but you can't assign your values to somebody else. And that's one of the problems. And people sometimes become offended, and that ego gets in the way because, oh my, they're doing this and they're doing this, and that's not the way we'll do it. That's fine. And so that emotion and that ego kind of overlap a little bit in that case. And so those are kind of those things that you want to have like a balanced, internal mechanism, like you alluded to, where you're having that struggle of what is the right way to go ahead with an organization. And that's, again, ties with your ego and your emotion. The last thing is you need to be transparent. Don't be something you're not. You could tell a phony pretty quick. First impressions are just that, first impressions, but they're not necessarily lasting impressions. But you only get one opportunity to make a first impression. And so it's good to make a positive first impression, but at the same time, be who you are in that first. Don't try to be something you're not. People will see through you very quickly. And so because we want to be something we're not sometimes, because we want to put ourselves or elevate ourselves, because we feel like we have to be a certain status, prestige, what have you, we allow our ego to get in the way. Matter of fact, you asked me, what should I call you? And what was my response?
Joe.
Right. You wear your titles, don't let your titles wear you. I've had friends joke and say, what do we call you? Do we call you Colonel? Do we call you Doctor? I said, call me Joe. You've called me Joe all my life, and you guys know me well. Or anybody, just call me Joe. It's good enough for my parents, it's good enough for you. I don't have to tell you these things. You know these things.
Would that go in a military setting where you're in command of a group of some sort?
I'll be honest with you, at certain levels, yes. When I was a company commander, when I was a battalion and brigade operations officer, I had senior non-commissioned officers who were supposed to call me sir. Now whenever we were in front of soldiers, it was yes sir, no sir, all that good stuff. We were behind closed doors, it was Joe and Ray, or it was Joe and John, and we were able to have it. At no time did we ever have to. Matter of fact, my senior NCO right now, Master Sergeant Moon, when we're behind closed doors, he'll call me sir always. And I tell him, you can call me Joe. We're retired. He goes, no, sir, I won't, sir. Right. But every once in a while, we'll say Joe and Doug. And that's just the way, again, be transparent, be a real person. And that's part of that servant leadership. That's a definition for servant leadership. I don't know if you guys got it up on your screen yet, but basically it starts with you get involved with something because you want to serve. You don't get involved with something because it's going to make you look better or going to benefit you. You have this desire to become involved in an organization because you either enjoy it, you believe in it already, and you want to support it and help it along. And then at some point, you realize that you might be able to help it a little bit more if you attain or take on a leadership role. I mean, think about have you ever been part of something where you just start out as one of the crowd. The next thing you know, you're like, well, you kind of matriculate your way into a leadership role.
I suppose that's how I became the chair of the history department.
I was hoping you were going to say that, right?
Although now I'm the director of the history program because everything's been reorganized here. But yeah.
All right, so explain that. How'd that happen?
I don't know. Probably, I mean, I can tell you how I think it happened, but probably you could ask my colleagues and they might give you a better answer. I didn't set out to be the chair at all. I think basically what happened was when the previous chair moved along, I was asked to be the chair, and by a number of people in the department. And
Why do you think they asked you?
well, again, you'd probably be better off asking them, but I think they thought that I would be good at the job. I think they thought I had the interpersonal skills and the personality to serve the department well.
So you have these certain skill sets that.
At least I hope. Maybe there's some of my colleagues out there.
You remember I work in the
laughing
department, right?
Yeah.
No.
So
But so when they told you, hey, you didn't have to take the job, though, did you?
no, I didn't have to take
So then why did you take the job?
I think I took it for two reasons. One of them slightly frivolous. I'll get to that secondly. The main reason I took it was because I saw it as a really interesting challenge. It was something that was an aspect of being in the department that I had seen a lot of but didn't really understand properly, and I saw it as an opportunity to kind of grow. I'd been in the department already for 13 years, 12 years or something like that. And it seemed to me to be an opportunity to learn other aspects of how the department functioned, how the college functioned, how the university functioned. To me, it was like a road to some new scenery in a sense that I hadn't seen before. The other reason is because moving into the chair's office, I had this
Nice
beautiful
window.
big window. Yeah.
You always got. There's always a perk with it. You got to take
which
the
I
perk
no
a lot.
longer have.
Right,
because,
that's right. You've
things have
been relegated. But so it's that servant piece, and you see things when you're part of the organization from a bottom-up perspective, and you're like, well, if I could change this, if I could change that, if I were king for a day, I would do this. It's funny. One of the strategies I always used to apply when going into a new unit, where I was assuming the mantle of responsibility of leadership, I would not want to change anything right off the bat, and I would interview. If I was able to, everybody in the organization, if the organization was smaller, a dozen people or so. But in the large organizations, I would always interview the leadership 2 levels down. And what I'd ask them multiple questions and get to know them a little bit. And then the one question I was always asking was like, if you were me today, what would you change? And usually you'd get about 70% would come up with the same answer. So okay, let's change that today.
Let me ask you actually. I mean, you have a career that sort of has, 2 legs, one in academia, one in the military. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about those 2 aspects of leadership. What's kind of come from the military, and where is the military, where have you been able to display leadership in the military? And where has your ideas about leadership come from in terms of an academic background? And where are you able to use the same sorts of leadership skills in an academic setting?
Okay, I think actually, well, those are.
Did I just set up your next
No,
slide?
you actually set up 2 slides from now.
Oh, okay. So we'll get to that.
All right, we'll hold that because that was a
Okay.
great question. What I'm going to display here are what they consider the 10 characteristics of a servant leader. And I'm not going to go through each one of these because that would be long and exhausting. But if you just look at the pink highlighted in bolden areas, the first one is listening. Listening. Now that's a skill set. Everybody can speak easily, but listen. I always say there's 3 people in a conversation, a 2-person conversation. There's 3 people in a 2-person conversation. Think about that for a minute. Okay. There's the person that's talking, the person that starts listening, and then the person who's waiting to talk. Once you stop becoming the person that's listening and begin to become the person that's waiting to talk, you quit listening. Listening is an art form. And when you listen, and notice it's not just hearing, you don't want to be Charlie Brown's teacher going, wah, 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 wah. You actually want to listen to the words that are being said. Too often, we don't listen to exactly what people say. Now, my wife's probably out there going, oh my God, did he just say that? That hypocrite. Well, I don't lead my wife leads me, so she has to listen to me. I'm just kidding. So I do have to go home tonight. But that's it. It's an art form. Again, listening. And it's part of a form of communication that you have to really adapt or adopt. And one of the things too is having the opportunity to just sit back and listen to people express themselves. So listening is one. The other is empathy. Putting yourself in somebody's shoes. Can you really, truly ever put yourself in somebody's shoes?
You can make an effort, but no, you absolutely cannot live somebody else's life. You never know what it's like to be another person.
Exactly. And empathy is not sympathy. It's not like, oh, I feel sorry for you. But empathy is just that. It's empathy. It's attempting. You said it perfectly. It's attempting to put yourself in another person's shoes. It's attempting to understand somebody. or why they do what they do, or the things that happen to them. I always tell people, life gets in the way. And to me, that's my form of empathy. Bad things happen to good people all the time. Again, you don't wake up every morning going, hey, I want to be late for work. Things happen. Okay, bad things happen. Empathy. So be understanding, be sensitive to that. That doesn't mean you have to pretend you know what it's like to be this or that, because you truly can. And it's very difficult, but that empathy is kind of that philosophy that I've adopted of, people don't wake up trying to be having a bad day, kind of thing. The third is actually hearing. Is that what it says, hearing? Or healing. Healing. I can't see that. I can't say. All right, maybe I need glasses. So healing. Healing is, as a leader, as a servant leader, your responsibility is to help people get through their struggles. If you want people to become efficient members of your organization, you have to realize they come with a baggage. We all have baggage. We have lives outside of our work. We have lives outside the lives of our work. One of the things I used to do when I was a young commander, I had a buddy of mine, and every day I would come home from work, I'd tap this tree and go, and we carpooled. And after about a month of doing this, he asked me, he goes, Joe, why do you tap that flipping oak tree outside your house? I said, oh, that's my worry tree. He goes, what? I said, that's my worry tree. I said, all that stuff from work that's just driving me nuts because it's happening at work, I bring it, I tap it on that tree, and I come back in the house, and I'm with the wife and the kids, and I forget about all that.
Does the tree care?
I don't know. I never asked. It bloomed every year, so it was good. And then, coming back out, I would tap the tree, and he laughed at it. He goes, I said, that's just my way of kind of coping with things. And when, again, people are going to have bad days, life does get in the way, and healing and empathy kind of go hand in hand. Everybody feels better when they're able to help people. And it's funny because I had a lot of soldiers and students get in trouble, and I'd be on this side of the table, and they'd be on that side of the table, and they'd be like, oh, sorry. I used to carry a box of tissues, and we went through more than one box of tissues. And sometimes you had to punish them. You're like, hey, look, don't take this personal. I'm not going to take it personal. You didn't do it to me personally, but you messed up, so we have to correct you, and then we'll move on from there. And then they all would ask me, like, thank you. How can I ever thank you for this? I was like, one day, you're going to be on this side of the table, and somebody else can be on that side of the table. I said, you can thank me then when you remember that and help that person the way I just helped you. Because everybody needs a helping hand. If you think you're in life and where you're at, if you think you and I are where we're at today because you and I, we played a role, but you look left, right, and behind you, you'll see all those people around you that got you there. And those are the ones you need to appreciate and respect and thank when you can.
Absolutely. And speaking of helping hands and all those people out there, I'm getting some texts telling me there are some comments or questions from viewers and listeners. So let's have a look, see what we have.
Oh, boy.
Well, apparently they're mostly comments so far.
Okay.
From Joe Vitti, still carry the leadership. LTCLS, he taught me to be a successful Army officer. This has helped me in my current profession in the civilian world. So there you go. From Rick Williams. Hi, Rick. Great discussion. Totally believe in servant leadership. And from Francis Moldovan. I hope I didn't mispronounce that. This is so awesome. Being a personal trainer, I have to do all of this. That's another
definitely.
connection too, isn't it?
Right.
A personal trainer, very much about motivating people. I've suddenly been put in mind of a long time ago when I was in college. There was a low point in my life where I had the worst job I've ever had, at least in terms of I didn't like it. Other people may love this sort of job. I was a sales rep for about 2 months until the fact that I wasn't selling anything kind of ended that.
You're a bad historian.
Well, I'm better at almost anything else than salesperson, but or maybe I've become a little better at that over the years. But I do remember the person that was sort of the sales trainer spoke about sales almost in the way that you've spoken about leadership, as a kind of not just a thing you do to get people to buy stuff, but it's a whole philosophy of interacting with people and motivating them and understanding how they see you. And the guy told me, and I've sort of all the things that I didn't like about my short career as a salesperson, this one thing kind of stuck with me, was he said, Brian, ultimately everything in life is sales. If you don't like sales, you don't like life, because everything ultimately is about trying to persuade somebody in some way to do something for you. It's about trying to motivate people. And I guess in a sense, you're
Exactly
saying something similar, yeah.
He's right.
Yeah.
How you do it and why you do it's another reason. The servant leader, the genuine leader, you don't do it for you. You do it, and it takes you a while to understand that. I once had this said to me, and I've repeated it millions of times, I would say, about one of my mentors who said, I started my military career and it was a job. I got in the Army, it was my job. And he goes, then it became a profession of arms. He goes, then it became a calling. And as I progressed, I understood more importantly what my role was. And my role was to take care of soldiers. And I've always said, if you take care of soldiers, if you take care of people, they'll take care of you, they'll take care of the organization. They'll be motivated to do that. Not, what's the worst thing one of your parents could ever say to you growing up?
I don't know. I don't think my parents ever said anything terrible to me particularly.
Well, you
but
must have not done anything bad like me.
I did some dumb stuff.
Ty, we'll get some of the other people in the room. What's the most worst thing one of your parents could say to you?
They're ashamed.
They're ashamed or?
Ashamed or it's on the tip of my tongue. Mostly ashamed.
Ashamed or disappointed? I'm disappointed. That's like a dagger in the heart.
Well, I had that from the nuns in
Yeah, I was a
Catholic
Catholic.
school.
Yeah. I'm disappointed.
Not so much from my parents.
Right, we're disappointed in you. How many times have you done things and tried to succeed at things because you didn't want to disappoint somebody? Not because you were afraid of them or what they might do to you, but you didn't want to disappoint them. That's when you are able to motivate people to the point in an organization that they do things not because they want adulation or they want awards or rewards of any sort or they want recognitions. They do it because it's the right thing to do. And they don't want to disappoint the people that are around them and their leader.
Right.
Then you've achieved success as a leader. Some of the other servant characteristics we talk about: awareness, being aware of yourself and your surroundings. Even more so today, you have to be aware of your surroundings. Unfortunately, and there's some slides later on, we can talk a little bit about it, but unfortunately, sometimes we're too aware and we're too sensitive to it. And so there's a fine balance between awareness and sensitivity. You have to understand that the environment you're in, you're going to be in a multicultural, multi-ethnic, diverse, and I love the word diversity, especially in academia, we throw that word around. And then we talk about diversity of ideas, political ideas, religious ideas, and then you start getting just this large gap. Diversity is diversity, and it's good, and awareness, and there's a slide later on that I talk about tests of reasonable opposites. And if you tell me it's black, I'll tell you it's white, even though I think it's black too. If you tell me this person's good, I'll tell you they're bad, even though I think they're good too. What you want to do is you want to find that middle ground, and you want to be aware of where it sits. No organization is completely left, completely right, or completely in the middle. It's going to do this. And so you as a leader have to be aware of the fact of where your people are at, what are the issues, and how to come to a common ground. Too often, especially in our nation, we're worried about what we are, and most of the stuff we do, and not who we are, most of the stuff we do is about division and not inclusion, in the name of inclusion. That's the wrong approach. It's about what are those things that unify us.
Right.
You want to influence people to accomplish a task? You need to show them what unifies us, what's the goal, what's the intent, what's the mission, what's the vision. How do you see us together succeeding, not as individuals, but as a cohesive entity? Right. And that's what we don't have sometimes. And the last you talk about sales is persuasion.
Sure.
And it's exactly what you led to. The other 10 characteristics I'll leave up there for you, but we won't get in those. The one I do like is stewardship. I always ask my students when I teach this, what's a steward? Because nobody knows what a steward is anymore. What's a steward? Anybody know what a steward is? You're a steward.
I would say a steward is someone who takes something and passes it along, nurtures it and passes it along to the next
You assume
person,
ownership of it.
generation or something.
Exactly. You assume ownership of it. You grow it to the extent that you can grow it, and then you pass it on. The worst thing a leader can ever hear after they leave an organization and pass it off to somebody is like, oh, we took 3 steps back. It's not the same without you. No, the best thing a leader can hear is, we didn't even know you were gone. You know, we miss you. I mean, you're a great person. Don't get us wrong. We like to have a beer with you every once in a while, but at the same time, wasn't even a hiccup when you left.
Right.
Your job is to bring an organization to here, utilizing all the resources and the tools you're given, and take it to the max capacity you can. You know, and then hand it off to the next person and set that next person up so you can move on.
So if you're the guy who kind of messed it up, then they'll remember you.
Exactly.
If you're
Oh,
the guy-
yeah. So, I mean, and that's always been, you know, one of my philosophies too, is you try to hand it off better than you ever received it. And that goes right back to servant leadership. Hand it off better than you had it. You're the steward, you're the caregiver, you're the keeper of the flame, if you will, and you need to pass that on. Now let's go into what I always like to say, and part of my ego, how I keep it in check, which my wife will probably argue. I'm just kidding. But it's a daily battle with everybody to kind of keep yourself in balance and in check. Every day I wake up, I've got to look at this face, so I've got to entertain myself somehow. So I look as I'm shaving and I say, 3 questions I ask. First one is, what did I do yesterday that I could do better today? Because no matter how good you think you are, no matter how well you did something, you can always do it better and always improve. And there's always something else that you did poorly that you can improve on. It's a constant quest in being better. The second question I ask myself, which kind of dovetails with that, is what can I learn new today? You will die. You will pass from this earth an incomplete product. You will have that book that's still sitting on the shelf that's halfway read. You'll still have the leftovers in the refrigerator. You know, your bed won't be made. You're going to die incomplete. That doesn't mean you stop the quest for completing yourself even more every day. It's about learning something new. When I retired from the Army, I told myself I'm going to learn, I love music. I said I'm going to learn 2 musical instruments. Nah, 3. Nah, I'm going to make it 4. I didn't say I was going to be good at it. I just said I was going to learn it because I wanted to learn something. I was going to learn a foreign language. I was going to learn something. Every day, you need to become a better version of what you were yesterday. If you do that, and you are the example of that as a leader, others will follow that. They'll emulate it. You don't have to say, do it because I do it. You know, you sit down, you have conversations with people, you build those relationships, because leadership is about relationships. And they start seeing that, and they see the success you have, and they want to emulate that. They want to follow that path. And it's really soft sales. It really is.
So he was right, my old boss, huh?
Your old boss was right. And the third question I always ask myself is, what kind of impact do you leave today? Every day in life you leave an impact, whether it's positive or negative, great or small, you don't get to determine. Like right now, the 4 of us are in this room, and I'm leaving an impact, you're leaving an impact, we're all leaving an impact. We don't know what degree it is, and we don't know whether it's positive or negative. But every day you do something, even when you do something, inaction is an action unto itself. It's a choice. Choosing to do nothing is still a choice, and that has an impact. Especially as a leader, you need to be cognizant of that fact that what you do has an impact. We all have personal lives. We're not special. We're all flawed. Again, your baby's ugly. We're going to have bad days. Bad things are going to happen to us. Do you bring that into the workplace? And then do you let that drive your emotions that day? Do you let it impact the way, you know, that you're going to work and train that day? Like Frances said, she's a personal trainer. All of a sudden now there's a person relying on you to be at your best game, and you're having the worst day of your life. Do you bring that in? That's when you got to step outside yourself, strip yourself of, you know, ego. I always ask myself, like, bad things happen to you. And you ever hear somebody say, why me? Why me? Why not you? Why are you so special? Something bad shouldn't happen to you. Again, bad things happen to good people. It's not that they happen. What do you do when they do happen to you? How do you react? How do you behave? How do you continue to lead? Because there are people that are relying on you. And you as a leader can't have that bad day. Unfortunately, there's nothing more lonely than the leader on top. You can't afford to be that person that has the bad day and has an impact you. And so, again, you always leave an impact. And so those are the 3 questions I ask myself. What did I learn yesterday that I can improve on, because I can always get better? What do I learn new? Because you can always learn something new. And then what kind of impact am I leaving today? And that helps guide your actions.
Let's quickly catch up. We've got some more comments coming in, I think. Dave Grimm.
The Grimster.
you know
I
Dave,
recognize all these names, yeah.
How have you adapted your leadership style as the society has shifted to what some may seem as overly sensitive?
I really haven't. I don't think I can. And trust me, he's seen a raw version of me as well, but and he's probably laughing on the other end. But again, you have to be you. Going back with the 3 questions, what do you learn new today, and how do you improve on what you did yesterday? It's you'll continue. You still got to be you, and you still have to lead the way you're going to lead. I'm not going to try to be something I'm not.
Sure.
But will I educate myself and inform myself? One of the things that frustrates me, and it probably frustrates you too, is when people say things based on pure conjecture. Well, I read once or I saw once. You're like, where'd you get it? Oh,
There's a lot of that.
oh
these
yes.
days.
And you just have to be like, okay, ground yourself in fact, ground yourself in knowledge. And again, you don't know everything. You aren't perfect. So continue to improve your knowledge.
Sure.
You know, I know you want to get to another question here, but
That's probably another one of your friends.
One of the things I once had a general, I was giving a briefing about the cultural breakup of some of the groups that were in Baghdad, and I was giving this briefing to a 2-star general, and I was talking about culture, and he made an offhanded comment, not to be a compliment. He goes, "What, you got some kind of PhD in cultural history or something like that?" And it was funny because the colonel that was in the room, who was the chief of staff, kind of snickered, goes, and the general
Yes,
looks
I
over.
do.
The colonel looks over at the general and goes, or the general looks over at the colonel and says,
As a matter of fact.
it's like, "What are you laughing at?" And he goes, "Well, as a matter of fact,
Yeah.
he does." And that's why we asked him to give you the brief. He goes, "Really?" So we go through the brief. All of a sudden, his demeanor changed, and we talked. And he goes, "Hey, I want to apologize." I said, "Thank you, sir. I really, that means a lot to me. I do appreciate it. I know you didn't have to do that." I said, "But remember this, sir." And I kind of did it in a tongue-in-cheek way because he could still light me up and fire me. I said, "Don't confuse longevity for experience and experience for knowledge." He looked at me and goes, I think you just did not pay me a compliment there, Major." I said, "Absolutely not, sir." I said, "But it's okay because it's all of us." I said, "Just because you've been around for a long time doesn't mean you have all the experience. Just because you have the experience doesn't mean you have the knowledge. Those 3 combined make you, a successful leader. And sometimes you have to realize that while you may be a person who's been around, you may have experience, and you may be a smart, intelligent person with a lot of knowledge, there are a lot of smart people in the room alongside you. There's a lot of experienced people in the room alongside you. And I could tell you story after story of subordinate leaders stepping up, soldiers, students, people stepping up and taking the lead on things, even though you were the leader. And the thing is, rule number 1, you empower your subordinates. You let them take over. And then
Actually,
you watch
speaking of subordinates, I think the word subordinate was in that next question, or maybe it was insubordinate. Oh, no, there we go. Elaine Jacobs.
Okay.
How do you handle a subordinate who doesn't like to be led? Good question.
Well, that is a great question. How do you handle a subordinate that doesn't like to be led? You give them leash. For example, how much leadership do you want to give somebody? How much direct control do you feel like, how much of this do you need to do? You don't know. If you're going to create the alphabet, do I need to tell you I want 26 letters, I want A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and take it all the way? If I've got to tell you that, then why do I have you? And again, as a leader, you got to strip yourself of the ego of, I need to tell this person. Sometimes you got to give them the ability to grow and make mistakes. One of the best, Colonel A. Kent Schweikert, my battalion commander when I was in the 101st, once told me, first day on the job, he goes, "Joe, you're an infantryman. I want you to do 3 things. Shoot, move, and communicate. That's what infantrymen do." I said, "Absolutely, sir. It sounds great." He goes, I'm going to tell you something. If I put something on your schedule that stops you from shooting, moving, and communicating, you let me know. I'll take it off if I can. I said, "Outstanding, sir." He goes, "Second thing is you're going to screw up. And I'm okay with it. But don't get anybody killed and don't get anybody hurt. And make sure it's not because you didn't do a proper mission analysis and going through all the situations to think your way through that problem. Because bad things are going to happen. That's just it." So sometimes you got to give your subordinates that leash to grow. We have this thing called a tactical standard operating procedure in military units. And it's the way that you're going to run everything, even the way you're going to wear your equipment in combat or in training or whatever. And usually the leadership writes the they call it a tax op. They write the tax op and then the soldiers execute it. So when I took over, I was like, I'm not going to write this. I'm not the guy who's going to be carrying this. I'm not the person that's going to be doing this. So let's invert the process. Let's start it with the soldiers. Let them have a cut at it.
Right.
And then they'll give it to their leaders, and we'll work it backwards. When I received the finished and edited copy, it was phenomenal. I wrote one thing. I wrote the cover letter saying this is the way that we are going to do business, blah, 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 blah. We made copies, handed out. My battalion commander, so I said, this is fantastic. We need to make this the battalion standard. We handed it to the battalion. He goes, you did a great job, Joe. I said, I didn't do a job. I wrote one page. Right? And that's kind of that process, right? So now we've talked about ego. Let's talk about emotion a little bit, which is an easy thing to get over. We are emotional creatures. Everything we do is about emotion. And emotion usually leads you to conflict. Would you agree?
Very often, yes.
Why do we have road rage? Now I know my friends are laughing out there because I can rage.
Okay.
Right, because the left lane's mine. It's nobody else's, it's mine. When I'm in the left lane, it's mine, right? But
Well,
seriously.
I grew up in the UK, so the left lane is mine. Okay,
Truly yours, right?
Yeah.
But seriously, why do we have conflict? Why does conflict arise?
Because two people both want something and neither wants to yield, I suppose, something like that.
Is conflict bad?
Not necessarily, but often yes. I mean, it depends how it's handled and what it leads to and so on. I mean, there's a famous saying, there is no progress without struggle or something like this. So conflict can be a very useful thing. And many of the things that the most important lessons I've learned in my life have often come from conflict and from people insulting me and to be frank, and upsetting me. And I go back and I think about it and think, well, after I get over calling them what this or that, you think, maybe there's a point to what they said. So there can be conflict that can become useful, but you have to be able to make use of the conflict. It's also easy for the conflict to escalate.
So when you step outside yourself and after you called people those colorful names, and what did you do first in order to come to that thought process to resolve, maybe they might be right?
I think basically it's a process of thinking about yourself more objectively and how you maybe look to other people, and I suppose stripping yourself of ego and things like that you've said.
You took your ego out of it, you took your emotion out of it, you stepped yourself out of yourself.
Which does raise another question, though, that I wonder about, which is the degree to which there is a personality that's kind of inclined to be good at leadership, because not everybody is equally able to strip themselves. Some people get more emotional about things than other people do. Some people are more sensitive than others. Obviously, there are ways you can learn to strip yourself of these things, but it's harder for some people and it's easier for other